The Gambling Files podcast presents Desert Island Discs with your host, John Bruford. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of TGF Presents Desert Island Discs, the only podcast, as far as we know in the gambling industry, that goes into the dessert choices of the industry's movers and shakers. I'm your host, John Bruford, and to introduce format, because it's still relatively new, we invite guests to be stranded on a tropical island. And those guests are then allowed to choose 3 albums. For our younger listeners, an album is a collection of songs that was published at the same time. 3 books, 3 movies, 1 song, which is not on the albums. 1 pet, 1 object, 1 dessert, and 1 piece of advice to give to their younger selves. And they get to choose when they give it to them. We might introduce a little striation to add to that today. We're not sure yet. We're not sure how cruel we're feeling. And interestingly, today's guest is the first person, I think. Oh, no, you see, you could be the second because you might be able to count Finton as well. I was going to say you're the first person to be a guest on every podcast I've ever hosted, because you were on the Bruford Files, my original podcast. You've been on the Gambling Files when Games Global was being formed. And here we are in Desert Island Discs. So this week's glutton for punishment is Mr. Walter Bugno, CEO of Games Global. Walter, welcome.
Thank you, John. And this is certainly the one that's most out of the comfort zone.
Yeah, we just thought, what's going to scare people? Let's do that.
Yeah. It's fun.
Yeah, we always say like this one's about people, not about work. And in an industry that's as almost completely relationship driven as the gambling industry, we should get to know each other a little. And I woke up in bed one night and I thought, you know what? I'm not sure what song Walter would choose. I need to find out. and so here we are. So
okay. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so just to warm you up a little bit here, to grease the wheels. How's life?
Life is outstanding. I'm currently in Las Vegas, where my son and his family, so our 2 grandchildren, live. We were here for Easter, and I'm here for another 10 days before I head back to Europe. So.
Nice. That does sound all right, especially like I'm looking outside and we're just having a bit of a cold spell here in Wales.
Yeah, well, here it's 32 today, I think. So it's nice.
Well, the cold spell here only lasts for probably 10 and a half months a year. So we're all looking forward to summer.
Yeah, agreed.
Or to the
heat.
Potential of summer, I should say.
The potential heat. So,
look, we usually start, or we have started so far with our previous guests, with the 3 albums.
Yes.
Because I think it's a nice grounding. So, do you want to take us through your music?
My 3 albums. Well, the first album that I would take is John Farnham's Anthology album. There you go. There's a name that very few people would know. Right?
When you said his name, I assumed you were going to go Whispering Jack.
Yeah.
That was the big one.
Well, there you go. But the anthology, considering I'm stranded on a deserted island, the anthology is effectively his greatest hits.
Compilations have been big so far.
Yeah. And so John, of course, apart from being a friend, is an icon of the Australian music industry. As you know, my background is Australian-Italian, and his music is what I grew up with. So I love John. So that's my first album.
I've got to take you back a little bit there.
Yeah.
John is also a friend.
Yes.
How do you just drop that into conversation there?
Well, uh, in part of my work history, I was the CEO of a company called Edgell Birdseye, which then became Simplot Australia, and we were doing an Edgell Birdseye is a very famous brand for frozen and canned vegetables, right?
Yeah.
And we were doing a major marketing campaign, and we were deciding who could we use to be the face of our brand, and we chose John Farnham. And so we reached out. We reached an agreement with his agent at the time, a gentleman called Glenn Wheatley, who was also a very famous person in Australia, and and through that, over the years, we became friends. And I think I've attended, I don't know, 100 of his concerts.
Wow.
And
That's groupie status, Walter.
yeah, and I've been part of. I was fortunate enough at one of probably the single favorite album of his, which is not necessarily the biggest album, but it was my favorite, which was called Romeo's Heart. When they did the official launch of that album, and they took away a whole heap of the music executive and the press and the media and radio and TV. They did a 3-day sort of getaway to launch the album. I was invited to be part of those 3 days as an observer, and it was just fabulous. And so John's always been a huge part of my music history, right?
So your first album, and we're already at I was not expecting that moment.
Yeah.
But
All right.
I listen to loads of Australian music, and I have
Yeah.
done since I was a kid. Because when I was a kid, In Excess were bubbling under, and
Yeah.
Crowded House were becoming popular in the UK, and then you've got.
I'll throw one at you, which is also it's not in my 3 albums, but if you were to ever interview my son, he would have it in his 3 albums, because it's also a family friend now. Is a very, probably today's biggest Australian performer, which is a guy called Guy Sebastian, and Guy has sung at every one of our major family events, and he won Australian Idol, the original Australian Idol, and it cost me a fortune, as my wife and my son were paying, were texting in his name, but he became a friend as a result of that, and we see each other whenever we can, and when he comes to Vegas or when we go to Australia. He's been to my wife's most recent birthday party, and yeah, so he's another good name to listen to. But it's not in my top 3 albums, but he's a very good guy.
Do you know Ivor Davis as well?
No, I don't know Ivor Davis. Right.
I'd have been asking you for an autograph then.
All right, do we got to go to number 2?
Bring it. Number one, I mean, you're going to struggle to follow that.
Yeah, so number 2 is I Will Always Love You, the best of Whitney Houston. Right?
Wow.
Yeah. So
it's another anthology.
Yeah, so this is a tough one. This was a tough one because I was undecided about whether I'd take the album or whether I'd take the movie The Bodyguard. So I ended up with the album, right? And the reason is because are we meant to be truly honest here? Or?
Fuck yeah.
I've always had the hots for Whitney Houston.
She was an insanely beautiful woman,
and so that's why the album brings back lots of memories of scenes from the Bodyguard. So and plus, I loved her music and I loved her voice. But
there's a note that she would hit in off the first album, which I think was just called Whitney, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There's a note she hits, and I can't. It might be in Greatest Love of All. There's a note she hits, like even now when I hear it, I get goosebumps all over me. There's something about a voice that's that well executed that you're just like.
It was angelic. It was just amazing. And the third album is actually two twin Canadian brothers who are probably not very well known, but they're called Music Travel Love, and I would take again. Sorry for this, but I'd take their greatest hits because you can't just take one album away. But as I said, they're two twin brothers. They're actually three twin brothers, but the third one only makes occasional appearances, and they travel the world, right, and go to iconic places, pretty much deserted most times, but iconic deserted places, and perform acoustically some of the great songs of today. And it's the music that I listen to when I'm traveling and I put my headphones on Spotify, or when I put my eye mask on, which has got music connected to it, to go to sleep. That's the music I put on in the background to listen to, and it relaxes me and disconnects me from the world. They are an amazing duo, right?
It's there are some musicians that, like, there's a couple of things I listen to because I used to do a lot of running, and I used to find myself doing this really annoying thing on long runs. I would be able to remember the songs that I'd been listening to. I'd know the approximate length of the song, or let's be realistic, I'd know the precise length of the song, and so I'd work out how long I'd been running.
Yeah, it's
Um,
incredible what you do. Yeah,
but now, if I'm doing any kind of exercise or any kind of endurance stuff, I play music where I cannot possibly know where I am in the song. So
it's
loads of instrumentals and stuff that doesn't follow normal forms.
yeah.
So not a clue, don't stand a chance, can't work it out, just carry on.
There you go. But they're my three albums, John. Right?
That's two surprises and one I couldn't possibly comment on. So you've really
Yeah.
screwed me there, I think. Funnily enough, I was looking up a Whitney Houston movie earlier. I do this quiz sometimes. Like if you finish a bit of work, you think clear my head, like eating a bit of pickled ginger when you're eating sushi. Clear my head, and I do this thing called plot thread, and Waiting for Exhale was on there, and I had to look up Waiting for Exhale because I thought the common thread was something to do with divorces, and it was.
Yeah.
And it's Whitney Houston and Angela Bassett. Now, I think Angela Bassett, as well as being an absurdly talented actor, may be the most beautiful woman on the planet.
Yeah.
And I
There you
thought
go.
of that when you mentioned Whitney. I thought, yeah, but she was in a movie with Angela Bassett. And
Well,
if
that's the
this were
beauty
top
of
tropes,
taste. Everyone has different tastes.
but nobody can deny. I mean, even if you don't like Whitney Houston's music, nobody can deny
Yeah.
that voice.
Yeah.
That was
Agreed.
like a generational talent. That was
Agreed. Agreed.
and a sad loss, but what you going to do?
That's right.
So we're going to move on to your books.
Yeah. All right. My books. Here are my three books. The first one, the first book I would take, it's appropriate in the days that we are right now, and also because of my faith, I would take the Bible.
Do you know what? As soon as you said it's appropriate for the days we're in now, I'd unfortunately muted my microphone, but I said out loud, Old Testament.
Yeah, yeah. So the Bible is something that I would take because there's always something in the Bible where you can actually take some reflection on, and considering you're there on yourself by yourself, thinking, okay, well, I'm not going to get saved here, so I better start thinking about tomorrow. It's a good book to use to every once in a while read and reflect.
Well, it's an incredibly dense book as well. It's like normally the type is set really close.
Yeah,
Like if you set it like a normal book, it would be like 4 times the size
yeah,
that it
I
is.
know. It'll take a long time to read, so I know I've got a long.
Gorgeous.
I know I've got a long time there. The second one is again, it's I wouldn't take novels. The books need to have some meaning for me, right? So the second one is a book on one of the or what I would consider the story of one of my iconic idols, right? And in this case, it's a book by an author called Andrew Roberts, and the book is Napoleon: A Life, which is obviously the life and history of Napoleon. And I've always admired what I've admired about Napoleon. It's very interesting when people say, I'm going to Paris, I'm going to the Louvre, and I'm going to see the Eiffel Tower. And the first time I went to Paris is I wanted to go and see the tomb of Napoleon. That's what I wanted to go and see. And you know, Napoleon was an average person who, through ambition and fight and scheming, maybe even whatever it was, he rose to greatness. He also fell very quickly, but his story is just an unbelievable story at an incredible time in the history of the world. So I would take that book, right? And then the third book I would take, again, it's my favorite history book. It's by a British author called Mark Thompson, and the book is called The White War, Life and Death on the Italian Front, 1915 to 1919. And there's two reasons for the choice of this book. The first reason is World War One was my father's single most passionate interest, right? My father was not a scholar. My father stopped school in third class, as back in those days, you know, there wasn't a lot of, you know, education for people, and made an incredible life of himself. But he had a history of, he had a passion for two things: boxing and we'll come to that, but boxing and World War One, and so I became passionate about World War One, and the White War is the history of one particular battle that happened near where my father was born, so the hometown of my father, my family, myself, in the northern part of Italy. And it was a battle where over 900,000 soldiers were killed in one battle, right? And it was a mistake. It was purely the generals that were in charge made a mistake, and it resulted in the death of all these soldiers. So it's a fabulous book, easy to read, because sometimes history books are not easy to read, but this one's an amazing one, and it brings back so many memories of where even though I was born in Australia, I grew up in Italy, of where I grew up, because I can actually pinpoint the locations and the places where this war happened. So they're my three books.
Well, I think so. Going back to your first choice,
Yeah.
so our first guest on Desert Island Discs, sorry, Desert Island Discs.
Yeah.
So I hope no lawyers are listening. Was Alex Pratt from Clarion, and
Yeah.
Alex chose for one of his books, The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, and he gave a similar reasoning to yours. And actually, if you're in total isolation, then belief in something greater than your immediate surroundings is going to be psychologically pretty staggeringly important, I would think.
Yeah, I agree.
It's very interesting that 50% of our guests have chosen something with a sort of a spiritual and an introspective sort of angle to it. So
Yeah,
really
I think that's important. I think that's very important. Agreed.
And talking about World War One, I mean, the way that we remember wars is really fascinating, because we've almost lost the generation that fought World War II now. They're almost entirely gone, and And it's World War One, isn't it, that were called the Greatest Generation, if I remember right.
That's correct.
Um, and um, it's I think we've forgotten quite a lot about how much World War One changed everything. Like we're talking about the first people that saw aircraft used in battle, the first people that saw poison gas used in massive numbers, and tanks, the first tanks. Can you imagine being in a trench and hearing a tank? And I don't know about you, but I would have certainly
Yeah,
hoped I was wearing a brown uniform that day. But
yeah,
it sort of it was the first time destruction could happen on such a massive scale, and like you say, 900,000 people, one battle, not one war, one battle,
yeah. One
and the
battle.
numbers
That's
are
right. And
just
yeah, it was
it's
staggering. And in Italy, still to this day, folklore music, particularly in the northern part of Italy, is built around the songs of the Italian army, one particular group of the Italian army called the Alpini, and they talk. Some of the songs talk specifically around that battle and how the river that runs near where we come from was turned red. That river turned red from
I
the
bet.
blood of all the soldiers that were killed on that battle. It's an incredible book to read. As I said, fabulous, fabulous.
I'm gonna look it up. Interestingly, I think the war that has had a disproportionate impact, and I'm not dismissing it as a minor skirmish by any stretch
Yeah,
of the imagination, but in terms of the evolution of mankind and communications and war, um, people my age and younger often think that the Vietnam War was one of the great conflicts of the 20th century. I don't think it even comes in the top 50.
yeah,
But the
yeah.
reason that it was important was because it was the first one where live reporting was done from the front lines.
Yes, yes. Of course, World War Two was horrific. Was horrific because of the genocide. But let's say lots of things were much more advanced at the time.
Yeah,
Not to this extent of today, but strategy, the weapons that they used were much more advanced
yeah.
of when World War One. World War One was as you said, the first time that many types of weapons were used, and that just young men were thrown to their death, and it was horrific, but fascinating to understand what drove something like that. And yeah, anyhow, we
I
should
know
move,
everybody's
we
talking
should
about.
move on to something less morbid.
But I find that period really interesting. But
Yeah, I
a lot of
agree.
people talk about political parallels to World War II now, but actually, the geopolitical situation prior to World War One is much closer to where we are now.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're right. I think you're right.
But keep calm and carry on.
Yeah,
But I'm totally going to look up the White War. I've made a little note of it.
yeah.
And
Great
music
author, great
parallels.
author, and he's a British author writing about an Italian war, which is very
Right.
interesting because it's very
Very
impartial.
good then.
It's very impartial then, as a result. Right?
Okay. Hey, you're a great fan of football, of Italian football.
I am.
I've probably asked you this before. Have you read The Miracle of Castel di Sangro?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
What a
Yeah,
book that is.
yeah, I know.
But all the better for being an American author experiencing Italy.
Yeah, there's some great football culture books around, and that's certainly one of the greatest. I
Yeah,
agree.
big favorite of mine. Okay, so now we're going to move on to your three movies.
Yeah. Okay. So you talked about football. One of my movies would be a football movie, right? There's a movie that was released. It's movie documentary, right? But it's still a movie. It's the FIFA 2006 World Cup film called The Grand Finale, right? Um, and There's three reasons why I would choose that movie. One is I'm a football fan, so I can't do without a fix of football on a regular basis. The second reason is Italy won the World Cup.
They did. That was Cannavaro's year, wasn't it?
And since then it's been a disaster. We've missed apart from 2010, we've missed the other World Cups, right? And thirdly, it was the first time in 32 years that Australia participated at the World Cup. They did exceptionally well. They beat Japan, they drew with Croatia, and they lost 2-0 to Brazil to then qualify second in the group and get out of the group. They then played Italy in the next round, and Australia lost to a 92nd minute penalty, which was a dive by the Italians, right?
Italian diving.
And so at that time, I was involved with football in Australia. So it was a bittersweet moment. The Italians went on to win. The Australians got knocked out. But at least the claim to fame is the only team that knocked us out was the world champions. And it changed sort of the history of football in Australia from that moment. So that would be my first movie that I would take. So there's lots of great memories.
Okay.
The second movie that I would take is my favorite movie of all time, right? And it's Russell Crowe's Gladiator. Not Gladiator 2, which I think is an awful movie, but Gladiator 1 is my favorite movie of all time. And then third, going back to my father and my love of his two passions. One was World War One. The second one was boxing. Is the Rocky collection of movies.
You're lumping them all together.
So if I had to take one, I'd take Rocky 1. But of course, if I could take the collection, I'd take the collection. Right.
I'm not going to deny you the collection because I'm a huge Rocky fan myself.
Yeah, I've seen him so many times. So but they're my three movies.
The grand finale, fair enough. It's an Italy World Cup win.
Yeah.
You say Italy haven't been there much since, but you should try being English. We get there and then we're crap.
Yeah.
Gladiator. I remember when Gladiator came out, and I was living in London, and I went to see it at the cinema, and it was one of a rare movie at that time because it was all multiplexes, but it was a movie where people were queuing around the corner for it.
Yeah, it was,
and I hadn't seen that for decades.
Yeah, well, I was so looking forward to Gladiator 2. So what we decided to do one weekend, actually here the last time I came to Vegas, and I was here with my son, we decided to do an afternoon. We put Gladiator 1 on and we rewatched it again, I think for about the 15th, 16th time. And then decided to go into Gladiator 2. And unfortunately, it was so disappointing. But Gladiator 1 still grabbed it. It's got everything. It's got emotion. It's got passion. It's got energy. It's got everything. It's an inspirational movie for me.
It's there's an insane amount of talent in it. The great Oliver Reed, of course, died while it was being filmed.
Yeah,
undertaking a last legendary drinking session. Derek Jacobi, who actually has my favorite line in the whole film, "Who will help me carry him?"
Yeah. So you remember the movie. So you're a fan.
Well, there's a real standout performance in that movie.
Yeah.
And it's Connie Nielsen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
She is unreal. She's one of those actors where she's so good you barely notice her.
Yeah.
But she makes everything better by being there. She is phenomenal in that film.
Yeah.
And it's a thankless part because she gets to be upset and,
it was a fantastic movie. Fantastic movie.
Do you know, I walked past Ridley Scott once, right? And you could say he's had maybe the most influence on my life of any grown-up. I walked past him. I was in the middle of Soho in London, and I was on the phone to my flatmate Jules. And she used to work for a place that sold film stock, right? And I'm on the phone to her and I said, fuck, you'll never guess. I just walked past Ridley Scott. And she went, oh, do you know him? I'm like, what? Of course I don't know him. So, well, why did you mention that? I'm like, well, because it's Ridley Scott. She's like, yeah. She said, you know, I went for lunch with him yesterday. I'm like, yeah, you what? So he's still got RSA, Ridley Scott Associates, his advertising firm in Soho. And she went to lunch with him because they were selling him some film stock.
There you
She
go.
didn't
Well,
mention it.
I have not met Ridley Scott, but I've seen
Oh,
Ridley
family
Scott.
friend.
But I've seen Ridley Scott, for many years, I don't know now, but for many years, he was residing in Monaco, which, as you know, is where I live currently, and he lived in the same building as we did. Right, so we have a very small building, only 30 odd apartments, and he was in one of them was his.
Oh,
So,
I'd be camping out waiting for him. I'm not missing a second opportunity. I saw him and I saw Chris Morris the same day. You might not know who Chris Morris is, but he's a satirist and a filmmaker. He made an incredible movie called Four Lions,
right,
which
don't know
somehow
it.
manages to make comedy out of suicide bombing.
Uh,
It's
I got it.
it's very
Four Lions.
difficult. Yeah, Four
Right.
Lions. It's very difficult to explain how it works. Early film with Riz Ahmed. It's amazing
Okay,
and
I'm putting
completely
that one
bonkers.
down. I'm putting that one down.
But listen, right, the Rocky movies, right? So you've got Rocky 1 to 5, then you've got Rocky Balboa,
And then you've got Creed.
then you got Creed 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, but I
Now,
wouldn't go. I don't go. I don't go. I think they are not part of my collection.
I enjoyed the Creed movies a lot
Yeah, I did. I
because
liked
they
them, but
they
it's not.
they hark back a bit,
Yeah,
and like there's a moment where Creed's training with the son of Apollo's trainer. And Apollo's trainer was played by the great, and this is massively undervalued actor, a guy called Tony Burton. And I'm a big fan of Tony Burton. He's brilliant in everything, especially Assault on Precinct 13. Another one of those actors, he's a background actor, but he
yeah,
never tries to steal the scene. He's just there to be furniture almost.
yeah.
He's such a talent. So, yeah. So, like Rocky, I always describe Rocky in the same way to people. It's a love story about a boxer. It's not necessarily a boxing movie. It's a love story
Agreed.
about a boxer.
Particularly the first one, right?
100%.
Yeah,
Now, I was talking about people queuing around the corner to get into movies. When Rocky 4 came out, would have been about 86, I think 86, maybe 87. I went to watch it with my brother, right? Now, my brother at that time bore a passing resemblance to Sylvester Stallone, right? So we're there. I'm with my brother, his girlfriend. Now, it was hands down, like I love going to the cinema. But Rocky 4 was the best experience I've ever had in the cinema. Because when he hits Drago back in the fight at the end, a British cinema in the arse end of the countryside, everybody stood up and cheered.
I think that was probably around the world that happened, other than in Russia.
I've never seen anything like it before. Never seen anything like it since.
Yeah,
But I mean, it was indescribable. But we're walking out after the film, and they're queuing for the next showing because this was pre-multiplex. They're queuing for the next showing, and these two young women see my brother, and they start screaming and pointing. Oh my God! It's him! It's Rocky!
it's Sylvester Stallone.
And I'm just there going, "Yeah, it's totally him." Yeah. My brother's girlfriend's just there going, "You dickhead." And my brother was trying to pretend to be embarrassed.
There you go. That's a lot of fun. Anyhow, great movies.
Yeah, fantastic. But I always say about those movies, you got 1 to 6 in the Rocky movies. If you just take 1 and 6, you've still got the whole story.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But you're missing out a lot on a lot
Oh,
of
totally.
great. By the way, on a lot of great music, along the way. And part of the reason for choosing the movies, apart from the fact they're great movies, and that if you're on your own and you're down and depressed, just watch those movies and listen to the music, and it picks you up, right?
Well,
So
the Rocky movies were the inspiration behind on this having 3 albums and choosing a separate song. Because nobody's going to come on here and choose a Survivor album,
yeah,
but you could definitely choose Eye of the Tiger.
yeah, that's right.
I mean, did Survivor write any albums?
Well,
I'm sure they did.
it was very again a side story. As you know, last year we had started the process of taking Games Global to an IPO, right? And we were due to do the final before when we had done the road show. We had a day where we were presenting to all of the analysts down at the Wall Street at the stock exchange, right? We left the hotel, and it was a 400-500 yard walk from our hotel to where we were staying to the stock exchange, and we were walking, and I started concentrated to get into the zone, so I put my headphones on, and I put the Rocky music on in the background as I was walking there. As I'm walking there, one of my head of HR came up to me as we got to a set of lights and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Are you listening to Rocky music by any chance?"
Were you
Because she
strutting?
step. Dun, dun.
Have you been to Philadelphia?
Many a times. I used to work in a long time ago now, but I used to work for Campbell Soup Company, which is in
Where haven't
Camden.
you worked, man?
Yeah, at Camden, New Jersey, and but you wouldn't stay in Camden, so we used to stay in Philadelphia. So yes, I've done all the.
You do the steps.
Yeah, I do the steps. I've done everything like the
I
tourist
did the steps.
thing. I've done that. Yeah.
I was there traveling around seeing some companies when I was doing Casino International, and I met up with a chap called Andy Reichling, used to be at MEI,
Yeah.
and Andy very kindly took me to the steps so that I could
Yeah.
run up the Rocky steps, and it
There
was
you
just.
go. Everyone does it. Yeah.
But I was like, do you know what? I could probably die now and be all right. I just never thought I'd do that. You know what I mean? It's like such an outlandish thing for a kid from the arse end of South Shropshire to go and do. It's like this is living. Okay, what's your song?
Okay, this one's going to sort of age me a little bit, right? So the song that would not be on the album is a song from 1979, Monty Python, Always Look on the Bright Side of Life, right? So yeah, I thought you're on there on your own. It's pointless getting depressed. You might as well look at it and say, okay, let's find the
I was not
positives.
expecting that.
Yeah, let's find the positives in this. And if you look through the lyrics of the song, there are lots of let's say lines where you could say, okay, I can see myself exactly in this situation. Okay, what am I going to do now? All right, let's look on the bright side of life.
And it ties in with your choice of the Bible.
Yeah,
Kind of.
kind of. Yeah.
But oddly, that's
my
a song that I've got personal ties to that song, kind of.
There you go.
So like my dad's funeral, that was the one that he rolled out to.
Oh, well, wow. Yeah.
And my mate Toby, who I've mentioned on the Gambling Files podcast loads of times, to the extent we actually had him on once just to prove that he was real. Well, Toby's uncle was a film editor, and
On
he
Monty Python.
edited the Monty Python movies.
Ah,
And he's in.
bad
I
boy.
don't think he's in Life of Brian. He's in Holy Grail. He's the
Yeah.
first knight. I think he's wearing a bucket on his head that's killed by the rabbit.
Right.
It's like,
What a great part.
what a claim to fame that is. I was like, we did a play we did a Shakespeare play in Holland Park in London, me and Toby, when we were like 16,
Yeah.
and we were staying at his uncle's house, and he told me that, and I was just like, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard
Yeah.
any adult say.
Let me say that this choice of song didn't go down well with my wife when I told her I was doing this, and she goes, "Oh, what song did you choose?" And I chose "Always Look on the Bright Side of Life" because there were two other songs that she thought I would actually choose ahead of this one. One was a song that I wrote for her because she goes, "If you're on there, you'd be remembering me, right?" And the second one is a song that I've never really cared what people think, but I've always thought it was one of the greatest songs that I've ever heard, which was Celine Dion's song, "My Heart Will Go On" with the Titanic, because I love that song, and I'm a romantic at heart, and I've always said that's my song that I want to be remembered by, and when it's the last song, but I'm on a deserted island, so I've got to think about me. So,
But is it fair to say, with Whitney and Celine being mentioned here, you like a good ballad, don't you?
I do. Yeah, I'm a ballad. My wife's a rocker, but I'm a ballad guy, right? And if you listen to Music Travel Love, it's all the great ballads being remixed in acoustic form. All right, then there came now I know the question that's coming. This has been the hardest one for me to answer.
Are you sure you know which one it is?
No, I don't actually. I think I do, but let's see.
Well, which one do you want?
I don't care. You go. Right.
Well, on my list, that's not the order that I'm actually going to do them in.
Okay. All right.
I was going to go with Pet next.
Yeah, that's the one I thought you would. And I was going to say this was the hardest one, right?
Yeah.
And again, when I shared this with my wife, her answer was absolutely not.
Okay.
So what I wrote down and then what it is, right? So let me premise this by saying I'm not a pet person, right?
Okay.
So I don't have anything against pets, but my life's been always about traveling and getting around, so it's hard to have a pet. My wife always wanted a dog, so I bought her a dog one day, right? And it was a dog called Aibo, AIBO, and it's the Sony robotic dog, right? And so I said, if I'm going to take a pet, I'll take Aibo, the robotic dog, because I don't have to feed it, I don't have to clean it, I don't have to worry about it. It's there, and it's my pet, right? And she goes, absolutely not. But in being quite serious, then if I had to take a pet, I'd take one that is no longer with us, unfortunately. But it's my son's British bulldog called Apollo, who passed away about just over a year ago. And it's the first time that I actually got I had a lot of affection for an animal, a pet. He was just a gorgeous dog. By the way, Apollo, related to the Rocky movies, right?
I guessed that.
And he was just a beautiful dog. And so if I had to take one, that's who I'd take.
Wow. That's interesting. Like when you do see, like I've never been a cat person.
Yeah.
But I absolutely adore my cat.
Yeah.
Because it's not cats generally, take them or leave them. Him though, legend.
Yeah, there you go.
And it's when you make that and that connection will come out of nowhere. But he just kind of picked me, and
yeah, that's what it is. Even Apollo was a connection. When we arrived here in Vegas, he would come up straight away, right? And that was interesting. So yeah, okay, all right.
They have a way of getting under your armor, don't they? Okay, we're going to go now with one object. Now,
Now,
this for objects, right? When I was thinking of this, I was thinking like, just like a thing that makes life better. Like for me, it would be like lip balm or floss.
yeah.
You never know when a lady's going to get washed up on the
Oh,
beach.
I never thought of that. This was also very difficult. This was also a very difficult one, and I ended up having to choose one out of three. Right, so one was practical, one is what I really wanted, and one was sentimental. Right, so I had to choose between the three. Right,
Yeah, it's tough. That's hard.
and so and I figured that the practical one I wouldn't be allowed to take, right? So I'd take a satellite telephone. So when I was bored of being there on my own, I could ring. But I said, okay, I'm not allowed to take that one.
You can only take it if it doesn't work, and you have to use it to beat to death any goats that are on the island.
There you go. But I figured if it was a satellite telephone, it might work. The sentimental one, and then I thought, actually, if I take this, all I'll do is I'll get depressed. So memory is better than that, was a photo of my grandchildren. So I then went with, what is it that I really want to take, right? I'm assuming that there is no electricity, right, on this deserted island, right? So I said I would take a golf net along with a 7-iron and some balls, even just one ball, so I can perfect my golf swing. There you go. That's what I would take.
Well, your bunker game could be perfected because there's going to be plenty of beach time, I think. It is a tropical island, but there is sand.
There you go. So I thought, there we go. That's what I would take. I'd take a golf net along with a 7-iron and one ball because I can't afford to lose the ball,
Well, that's interesting because I always say golf is like it's one of those games where you could play the same hole every day for the rest of your life, and you will never have the same day twice.
Yeah, that's very valid. It's true because that's why people enjoy being members of one club, because you can play the course and it'll be different every day.
Seriously, it's the ultimate goldfish sport, I think. But I would say I always used to say that about running, and then I realised it actually totally applies to golf as well. But with running, you could do the same run every day, and you'll never do the same run twice because you're different, the environment's different. There's so
your
many
motivation's different. What you're
trillions
thinking.
of
Agreed. Totally agree.
So and that's actually, I think a golf club is a really canny choice.
Yeah, thank you.
Very interesting. Okay. Now we come to the big important questions.
Yes.
What dessert would you take?
Easy. That was the easiest question of all of the questions.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So the dessert that I would take is mango pudding from the Minjung restaurant at Goodwood Park Hotel in Singapore.
That is very specific.
So every time, and I've been going to this particular restaurant now for 40 years, right? Every time I go to this restaurant, the first thing I go when I get there is I pre-order a mango pudding because usually they run out, right? So I just want to make sure that I get one. So I said, can I please reserve mango pudding, right?
Wow.
So that's the dessert that I would take.
They probably get it from the Aldi or Lidl down the road,
Probably, yeah, probably.
What's this guy? What's he reserving one for? You should tell him the secret. He could go get him in an 8-pack.
Yeah. We buy them in bulk.
You got this big tin.
But I think they make them individually in the cup, right?
Okay.
Because they're just perfectly molded to the cup. So,
do you know? Let's take a moment here to to doff our caps in respect to the kitchen staff that have to clean those fuckers, because I used to work as a KP at a place called the Longmynd Hotel in Shropshire at Church Stretton. And I've probably told this on the podcast before. They had a wedding the one day, and the chef thought it'd be really nice. It was lovely, lovely chef, really great guy. He decided to do individual creme caramels for the guests, and they had about 200 guests. And he used the breakfast teacups for them. So I then had to chip this stuff out and have them ready for breakfast the next day. And it took me all day and well into the night just to do the teacups.
There you go.
So, respect.
That's off.
Oh, those poor people. Now, I think you might be. I think we're gonna use you as a guinea pig here.
Okay.
But we're coming to the. I suppose it's kind of the big question, but
Okay.
a piece of advice that you would give your younger self, and you choose when you would receive it. What would you go for here?
So a piece of advice that I'd give to my younger self. So originally, because there were two thoughts, but then one became the song, right? Always look on the bright side of life. So It can't be that one, right? So then I ended up choosing, in light of the fact that I'm on a deserted island by myself, right, with very little, I've ended up choosing a Theodore Roosevelt quote. And the quote is, do what you can with what you have where you are. And so basically the advice is, don't be defeated. Assess what you've got, make the best of what you have with what you've got, and live life to the fullest.
How old would you be when you gave yourself that? So say you now on your deserted island. How old are you when you give yourself that advice?
How old am I? Well, I think that's probably the toughest question you've given me. How old would I be when I give that advice? I'd probably give that advice, from the last 6 or 7 years of my life. I've never thought about it. It's always been thinking forward, never backwards, right? I'm now 65, and I invariably find myself looking back now, and particularly when I'm around, my grandchildren, and and I think what is it that I would be when they're at an age where they can understand. What is it that I would say to them? This is the big learning, right, for me. We're not always dealt the cards that we would like. Sometimes you're dealt cards that you don't really even would never choose, but you've got to make the best of it. And so I think maybe since COVID, I think COVID was a real wake-up call, and that you've got to start, I discovered lots of things. I enjoyed the isolation of COVID because I got to spend more time with my wife in those 3 months that we were restricted from doing anything than the previous 40 plus years that we've been married. And I found out why I actually fell in love with her 40 years ago again, and it's fantastic.
But does she still like you as well?
That's it. She could be one of your podcast people. You can ask her. I hope so. Right.
No, there's COVID was a perspective changer for a lot of people in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I think it showed vulnerabilities in how we live.
Yeah.
That have affected an awful lot of people. And particularly, I think the kids that were unable to go to school or do their exams or all of that, we're actually seeing quite long-term effects from that.
Yeah. But also, John, society has created relationships that are very transient. A lot of people living on their own,
Yeah.
a lot of people sort of having short-term relationships. A period like COVID, where people were in isolation for a long time by themselves, you effectively have millions of cases of this podcast, right, for a period of a couple of months. And, it's very interesting, I find.
You say we should have called it COVID Island discs.
Maybe you should have. There you go.
Really would have taken off then, wouldn't it? So the guinea pig time thing, and I appreciate
Yeah,
you haven't actually you get these questions in advance. You haven't had this one in advance. You haven't had time
right.
to prepare this one.
Yeah.
But is there advice that you, as a young Walter, would give to yourself now as an older Walter?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Um, uh, there is there is one there is one instance in life that I remember so vividly, and when I get together with this particular person, we always, who's at the same age as me, we always reminisce back to this moment or this series of moments, right? So we were, I was 20, just married, 23, right? We were living in a nondescript, sort of very average suburb in Sydney, right? And both of us had just started our working careers. And every morning at 6 a.m., I'd get in my car, I'd drive a couple of Ks down to my friend's house, right? Park the car there, and then we would go for a run, right? Every morning we do 10 Ks together every morning, right?
Nice.
And we'd run at a nice, easy pace. And then when we got to the last 800 meters or so, if it wasn't me, it was him. If it wasn't him, it was me. We'd pick up the pace and we'd start sprinting till we got home, always trying to beat each other. And we'd arrive back to his driveway and we'd be exhausted, right? Finishing that run. And we'd sit back, and when we tried to describe why were we doing that? And it was because we were trying to be better than what we were, right? And always try to come out in front. And we said, we want to dream big. Yes, we're just starting off. We're young kids starting off in a corporate world from some nondescript suburb. None of the people that we were working with or the companies that we were working with, everyone was in the executive belts. We didn't have the money to live in those places. And we said, one day we're going to reach where we want to reach. And so we always dreamt big and went after our goals of running today faster than we did yesterday. And that would be the advice I'd give my older self. Never stop dreaming big, and never stop dreaming to be better than where you are today. And that's the advice I would give. And I think that keeps you motivated, it keeps you young, it keeps you energized. And recently, if anything, that thought process has probably been reinforced. I was invited to a birthday party of some friends in Monaco, younger friends of ours, and they had the 6th birthday of their son, right? And I met the father of the mother of this child. It was the first time I'd met him. He's 83, right? And I spent 3 hours in total awe, listening to him talk about how he lives life. and he is in the perfumery business, right? He still runs his own business. He still travels the world. He's on a flight at least twice every week, going somewhere. And I said, "What's the secret?" Because like 83, I'll sign now to be like you at 83. And his response to me was very simple: never stop learning, right? And always look at the positive side of the people that you meet, because if you can combine the two, it just gives you energy to want to keep doing more. And he said, "I'll never stop working, because the day I stop working is the day that I say, okay, it's over, right? And I'm not ready to say it's over."
I think that perspective, that openness to others, that when you meet people and that's your mindset, you create instant communities. You
Yeah,
create
interesting perspective.
instant bonds, and that post COVID is actually quite a rare thing, because we're all told to shut the door and not talk to anybody.
Yeah,
Um,
I think
and
that's important.
but social media as well.
Yeah,
We've all got millions of different ways to talk to each other, and yet we somehow say less.
yeah, yeah,
There is
yeah.
less sincerity.
Personal contact is so critical, and I find, if I look at it, then the move to join 4 years ago Games Global has been probably the most exhilarating experience I've probably had, because there's no doubt I'm the old guy in the room. There's a big age gap between me and almost every single one of my colleagues, um, and they motivate me. That motivates me. That keeps me energetic. It keeps me wanting to keep the pace, and I
I
feel so,
I can
so much
totally
better.
relate, because whenever I'm around younger people, I want to crush them too.
Yeah, there you go.
Especially I turned 50 last year,
You're
and
a baby. You're a baby.
I don't feel like one. I really don't. I'm so creaky.
Yeah,
But the thing, you hit these milestones, and you, like you were saying, I knew as soon as you said, in recent years I've been looking back more. I knew you were going to say your grandchildren was a part of
yeah,
that.
yeah,
And I hit 50, and I was looking back, and I was just sort of thinking about the things that are important to me, and community, and being in the world, even in small ways, smiling to people, saying hello to people, to strangers. Like I do that every time I go out the house. And it is those small things that we're social animals.
yeah,
It got me thinking about the importance of community. It got me thinking about, God, all sorts of shit.
yeah,
But the really, really simple basic stuff that we've moved too far away from. I can order anything I want off Amazon, or I can
go
walk a
down.
mile down the road and go and talk to a dude who's been living this stuff all his life, and who'll give me fantastic advice.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I'm 100% aligned. I always say life was better 30 years ago than it is today.
It was considerably simpler.
Yeah, yeah.
If you phoned somebody up and they didn't answer, you just didn't talk to them.
Yeah,
There's
there
no
you
opening WhatsApp, and certainly no tracking their phone.
yeah, there you
That's
go.
terrifying shit. Walter, I'm out of questions.
Great.
You've
Thank
got
you.
a beautiful tropical island now with all of your
Ah,
good stuff on it, and we
fantastic.
will we
I'm
will
going to
allow
enjoy.
that we will allow that rocky collection.
Thank you. That way I'll enjoy myself. I've got a few hours to pass.
Well, we've had some younger folks on, and they've been like, "Oh, can I have a box set of a series instead?" Go on then.
I mean, the one thing I got to say, and I haven't figured this one out yet, right? I haven't figured this one out. You've allowed me to take an album. You've allowed me to take some movies. It means that I've got to be able to have some electricity to be able to watch it. So instead of a golf net, I really wanted a golf simulator, but okay, I'll give that one up.
Well, let's assume you've got like a power monkey of, like the rechargeable battery cells,
There you go. That's what
and
it.
you've got your travel DVD
Yeah,
player or whatever on there. You
that's
better
that's
look
what I
after.
want to have.
Don't watch the DVDs on the beach. You don't want to be getting sand in there.
Okay, yeah, it'll be inside the hut that I've constructed.
Yeah, no, your shelter and all that's very much taken care of, and you've got monkey butlers as well.
Yeah, excellent.
Um,
Thanks, John.
thank you,
Thoroughly
Walter.
enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.